sign in.
Okay, sorry.
It's going right.
All right.
Oh, you could hear that.
You had something about hearing.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is there any public comment for matters not on our agenda tonight, but for which the city has jurisdiction? Seeing none, we'll move to the minutes from March 4th, 2025. Council has received those. Are there any corrections or additions? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve.
I'll move to approve the minutes of March 4th, 2025.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes for March 4th, 2025. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion is carried. First item on our agenda tonight is Mr. Chase Reagan, who would like to address the council.
Okay.
Mr. Reagan.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the council's time to hear me out on something here. And again, I threw this together today, just, I wanted to spend more time on it, but didn't get a chance to. But as I talked to one of the council members, I'm a firm believer in coming up with a solution when a problem is posed. And I guess I just want to go through the context and the background of where I'm coming from not only a business owner, but just as a citizen of this town, grown up here my whole life. So before I get into that, I just had a couple quick questions. And one is these new rates that I'm going to talk about, what are they based? Are they based on this total project cost alone, or is there something else?
They are based on a combination of covering the current operating costs and the project costs, which include not only the debt service, but future repairs and replacements for system components.
Okay. And then what is the total project cost for this?
The total project cost is approximately $14 million.
Okay. And is there going to be an SRF forgiveness?
Yes, $5 million.
And is that off of that number already?
That is part of the funding source for that $14 million.
So it would be 19
No.
million without it?
No, the loan repayment is $5 million less.
Okay.
Also less some of the grants that we've received. So we had ARPA money and an MSEP grant and an RREGL. It's a rural grant, and it seems like there was one other. So the bonds that will be issued are in two parts. One of them's the $5 million, which will be forgiven, and the other one is approximately $7 million and some change, if I remember right.
Okay, so just to clarify, the increase in rates, is that based off of the net after the forgiveness, or is that off the gross before the forgiveness?
Net after the forgiveness. These are, and analyses were done by the Department of Environmental Quality through the state revolving fund program.
Okay, so bottom line, these rates are here to stay for a while. We're not gonna see these rates lower once the SRF forgiveness and ARPA all come in.
While it is unlikely, the guidance I've been given from DEQ is to not look at the rate structure for at least a year. And some of that has to do with, as we see some of the the way the water rates are being applied throughout the community, there will no doubt be some adjustments. There also is the possibility as new residents, new buildings come online, for example, with the Copper Springs addition. The more houses you have, the more paying units you have to spread the cost over. So while there's no guarantee, I have said more than once that as we move forward into the future, if we can reduce the rates, we certainly should.
Okay. No, thank you. Yeah, that's helpful for me. So, back to, I guess, my ask to city council tonight is the timeline of events. We purchased the Betsy building in November 2022. Prior to purchasing the building, the seller, Steve Visikin at the time, saw his books, profit and loss, went through the city water bill. It was based on one unit for the last 3 years. And then since that time, it's been that same one unit is being billed for that period of time. Okay, in November, December timeframe, I got a call from the city office here asking about, hey, is someone upstairs now? And I'm like, yes, we just got a Mexican restaurant online, and I'm renting the apartment to them upstairs. I go, why do you ask? And the response was, well, the county is asking for updated information on who's living here. I'm like, oh, okay, got it. There was no discussion about a rate increase or anything like that. There was no discussion of that whatsoever. So, January 31st, I received my new bill. The bill jumped up to $367 a month. So now I'm getting billed for downstairs and upstairs. And so I called and asked, and there was a lot of confusion over, they didn't know if it was the restaurant next door at 219 Broadway. I got accidentally combined with mine, but basically, long story short, after a lot of time, talk with you, you were able to shoot me straight and say, no, you have someone up there, that is the ordinance or whatnot. So the big picture for me as a business owner, I went from January 2024 to a water bill of $139 to a year later to $367, triple, just short of triple the bill. Now, I was aware of the original increase due to the water project because I received notice in the mail like everyone else, and so I was planning for those other increases. But this, I was not. And in the process of this, my concern is there has to be better notification to people when rates change, like they were for the city project. I wasn't given reasonable notice. And one thing that's in our ordinances very clear is reasonable notice is in our ordinances quite a bit. 3 or 4 times it shows up. So the one thing I'm asking you to consider tonight is, was I given reasonable notice by just getting a bill out of the blue, getting blindsided with double my water bill for more than what was expected? After looking through the ordinances, and again, this is in part going to play into my recommendations, the current ordinances are vague. They are contradictory in places, they're confusing, and the definitions do not clearly define this type of situation. And I'm not the only one in this situation. The reasonable notice is another concern which I just mentioned. Whenever you're dealing with money, I ask the city basically have a policy or process in place if there's going to be increases or new services started up, that notice is given to business owners. Because Steve Visikin lived in that place for years and years and was never billed double what he should have been, per what the ordinance you're saying say, which I could very easily argue they don't. And then for someone new to come in and just out of the blue say, oh, sorry, here it is, that's discriminatory. It's discriminatory that he's also living on Main Street as his residence on the main floor, and you're not supposed to do that. So is the city picking and choosing who to say, no, you're gonna pay this, you're gonna do this? No, it's gotta be all or none. And that's what I asked. The little coffee shop in Reading Leaves, are they gonna get billed $170 extra? I hope not, but again, that's where I'm saying is I wanna be part of the solution, not just bringing you a problem here tonight. The one thing too, that before we get into fixing these, something that is very important to me is will the city promote the business philosophy? And I'm gonna give you an example. I've witnessed over 30 W-2s in properties that I'm either directly involved with or indirectly involved with. 30 W-2s, that's 30 employees that are going home, paying their mortgages, paying their water bills. From the business perspective, the Betsy, FRCS, laundromat, professional building there. What happens if these businesses go away? Those 30 W-2s also go away. Or they're commuting to Helen, they're commuting to Bozeman, they're eating there. They're buying their home repairs at Home Depot instead of Townsend Hardware. They're buying pastries and Three Forks on their way through. I mean, it is a reciprocal community that we have. Everything that we do affects the other person. And our businesses are our center of gravity here. Most of you are business owners, so you understand that very, very clearly. So when we promote businesses, I want to ask you a rhetorical question that I want you to think about. How are we setting up all businesses for success if that is our priority so that all people can live and thrive here? Okay, do we want to be a business-oriented community? And it starts here at the city council, I believe. You know, I could go through a lot of things that I don't want to point out and open up a can of worms, but there's a lot of can of worms that could be opened here with this. And that's not my intent here tonight. After giving much thought this past month on this, here's my recommendations in no particular order. Whenever there's going to be a new service or a startup, you have to notice the people 90 days in advance, just like you guys noticed for this big project. You gotta give that time and space. It's professional courtesy. Businesses. By and far, meters are the fair way to go. That's the only way to be ultra fair. But now the problem is to ask businesses to not only pay $5,000 to $6,000 for a meter installment, in addition to these increased meter rates, it's going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back, quite frankly. So, with water conservation is huge now. It's going on with the water compact and legislature. There's got to be some grants available that we could get all the business together and get them either fully funded or 70% funded to get meters in there for this type of situation. I think that needs to happen. That would be something to look at. And again, if we all come together as businesses, it could be bulk pricing, and it would be a lot cheaper than the $5,000 to $6,000 in addition to the grant. Until the meters are in place, we need to have a separate fee structure for these apartments that are above businesses. And I think the fairest way, whether it's residentials, because I know there's residentials that have studio apartments upstairs or whatnot, is we should base these on the number of people. I believe, other than a meter, that is the most fair way to base water, sewer, and garbage. It's all directly tied and correlated to the number of people in the household. For example, there's a one-bedroom studio that a friend of mine rents out. That one single person up there is paying that $167 a month, and the family of 3 down below is paying $167 a month. It doesn't make sense, okay? So if you base it on, prorated on the number of people, if someone has a big family, yeah, you have a big family, it's gonna be expensive for you. The other thing is if you're watering lawns, okay? Obviously, if upstairs in the Betsy, they're not watering lawns, that's a significant lift to our infrastructure, maintenance, et cetera. I say this, my mom's on a fixed income, but she has a nice lawn and she waters it. She should be paying for that. It's only fair. They'll figure it out. So again, I think that's the next fairest way is to base the water rates on the number of people that reside on that property, not whether it's a studio or whatnot. And again, we can get creative and we can still have flat rates no matter what, and then prorate, but that, again, there's a lot of ways to do this. Most importantly, ordinances need to have better clarity. It would not take much to clean this up, but when involving dollars, it's important to all of us that it's very clear. I've been through a messy lawsuit. I got a lot of scars on my back and I got educated big time. Our ordinances are lawyer fodder, big time. They really are. And I would hate to see our city endure that because that's basically just more money from our citizens that have to go fund the lawyers. And we can work something out here if that makes sense. And that's clear and not confusing. So my ask is this to the city, based on didn't get reasonable notice. I'm locked into my lease until November. At that time, I'd like to keep the same rate that I had been noticed for, the $210, which is the increase, until that lease is up. If for some reason they move out sooner and I get someone new in, yes, I'm gonna pass that new rate up to them and I'll start the new higher rate. I believe that's the fair way to come to terms with this. I say that with the caveat, with the ordinances, I believe I have a strong case that it's not clear, and I could argue the other way, but I don't wanna do that. I'm just asking the city to do what's fair here tonight, based on no reasonable notice on this situation. If I would've had notice, I could've put that in the lease, and I wouldn't have got stuck with it. So with that, Mayor, I'll turn it over to you.
Other questions or comments from council members?
Mayor, when did the city mail out the notices of the rate changes?
The increases in the
Yeah.
rates, as soon as, council had approved those increases, as you recall, we have a 3-month increase.
That was starting in September,
Yes.
right?
October, I think.
October?
September or October.
So
So
the,
we sent out the notices saying, the rates would go up this much on this date, this much on the subsequent month.
was that August or September?
I don't remember.
Mrs. Chase, do you remember receiving that letter in the mail?
I believe it was May that we received that for the increase in September. So it was a 3-month notice. 90 days.
Do you still believe that you were not reasonably notified?
I received my bill in January with no idea that was coming. And again, if I would've had 90 days, that had to been November when I signed the lease, so I could have very easily got ahead.
If I might clarify, the notice that Mr. Reagan is talking about now has to do with the additional charge for the apartment above, when
Yeah.
that was went through.
But there was a notice in May okay, there was a notice of the forthcoming rate increase that due to the history of Steve not having been billed with a separate apartment, you
Right.
believe that you were not well prepared for the identification of the apartment as a separate housing unit.
No, and when the city office called me, that was not disclosed either, which is really mind-blowing to me. That would have been the perfect time to say, hey, by the way, yes, your rates are going up here. And oh, by the way, you're gonna get this email or this letter stating this is what your new rate's gonna be. Nothing to that ever transpired, and that's all I'm trying to say, professional courtesy. I'm not trying to duck out of a city ordinance.
Any other questions or comments from council? Yes.
Unfortunately, what we're seeing is that quite a few businesses and residents have made, additional hookups and, improvements or whatnot to their building for varied reasons. Some people are diversifying, putting in B&Bs and things of that nature, and they're not telling the city. And before they make those changes, and the ordinance is clear that they need to notify the city and, then pay that appropriate bill. I do agree there should be more notice other guy was grandfathered in to that.
You mean Steve?
And then when it changed, it should have been told to you that there would be separate bills for building. But, I wish people were a little more honest on what they're doing and also check the city ordinances to make sure that they're doing things.
No, Vivian, that's a good point. I thought about that too, is how do you police that? And unfortunately, but I think it would be a good tool, is we put a steep fine in there. If you're caught you're not disclosing, having an Airbnb or another apartment, that'll help prevent that moving forward. Cause you wanna promote a trustworthy environment where people are coming into the office, say, hey, I got this rented out or whatnot, go ahead and deal with that.
Question?
Yes, Doug.
So my question to the public and the council is, since we've had a couple situations recently regarding this, how many places in this town, shops, garages, back buildings, whatever it may be, have water access that we're not aware of? And because there's been a handful in our recent past to bring that to light and then start throwing the bills at residents, customers, whatever, I can tell you there's probably 30 that I know of. So how can we throw the judgment consciously until we know or reset the precedence of what the ordinance should be in that regard? I thought about this, I can tell you there's a lot of places that, however, they got water to their shop and their house and whatever it may be, it's, in my mind, until we figure that out, how can we selectively just pinpoint the ones that we know?
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
You bring up an interesting point. We have a lot of people that park RVs in front of their buildings, especially during the summer. And how many of those RVs does the ordinance count them as housing units? Chase brings up an interesting perspective about the number of people using water.
And we really
An
don't
RV
know.
with 3 or 4 people shows up, they're friends of the family, they hook up, and they're using water, but not necessarily sewer. Actually, they're probably using both. And suddenly it's a second housing unit for a temporary period of time.
We actually have an ordinance that prohibits that.
They can't hook up to water?
Can't live in that unit.
How many people do you think do that?
I don't know, but more specifically to Doug's question, I would not say that we're being selective. As these properties are brought to our attention, we're looking into them and taking action. To Chase's comments about reasonable notice, certainly we could have handled that better, and we can learn from this as well. More specifically to the water service being provided to the Betsy location, I'm going to call on you, Eric. Our understanding is there's a single curb stop that's feeding multiple buildings.
Yep.
So that's part of the issue there too. And to rectify that whole situation, we're looking at needing to connect separate buildings to separate curb stops, and possibly where appropriate, strongly recommend or just install water meters so that those individual buildings have a clearer understanding of their water usage. All of this is going to take a little bit of time. Are there any other comments or questions, or comments from the public? Questions from the public? Yes. Please state your name for the record.
Todd Ross. After listening to the presentation and the ifs and the buts and so forth. Inflation is an ugly word. I'm 72 years old, I'm retired, and anytime there's an adjustment in our living expenses, we find solutions to fix that, especially in my house. And being on a fixed income, I have to look for solutions to take care of my, whether it's electrical need, water need, whatever. What I'm basically saying is that I'm not blindsided by this stuff because it changes constantly, nationwide, individually, corporately. And the one that really blindsides me the most is gas. You don't get a 90-day notice, you don't get a 30-day notice. It hits you the very next day. And I've really had to adjust to that. As far as water is concerned, I don't care if my RV pulls up in front of my yard and they ask some vegetable water because they have none. I would make sure that thirst is quenched. If somebody who's hitchhiking and his canteen is empty, he can come to my house and get water. I don't care. I want them to be, what's the word I'm looking for, taken care of. But one thing I've learned over the years, even at this age, is that whenever inflation kicks in and surprises us, then we make those adjustments accordingly. It's sad that most of this is passed on to the consumer, but that's life. That's the way it is. And I've been living in this United States for 72 years, and since I've been working from 15 years old, I've seen these changes take place. And every time these changes took place, I adjusted it to that. No belly aching, no whining. I just went on with the ride. And so, is something like this gonna happen tomorrow? Probably, and I'll adjust to it. So, that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Any further comments from council?
I would just like to point out, when you stated about, all the places that you don't know that are doing the same thing. We've had several duplexes come in here with one service pipe going to their residents. And we need to take into consideration that you have folks that are following this ordinance properly. We're doing it the right way, we're paying their bills. And when I made the comment that the council should use caution and maybe look at this and not make any rash decisions, that's why, because if you're gonna set a precedence, you're opening it up for all of those people to come forward and ask for the same.
Well, on that, my big thing is just to be fair and consistent with everybody, council, the city, because we can't do for one and not do for the other. Or do against, or whatever, so, I think, we looked at this ordinance prior to today, and there's gonna be odd situations. We faced that last council meeting, council forum. So do we just stick to the ordinance and go, that's the way it is, too bad, so sad? I don't think that's the fair way to look at that, that's my opinion, doesn't make me right. But with everything going on and the growth of Townsend and the water project, and all of a sudden these things are arising out of whatever, for whatever reason, we have to take a strong look at that and see, is this the right thing, just because the ordinance was written how long that was ago, and hold the feet to the fire? Or do we need to revisit that? Because there's gonna be different circumstances, that's life. And we're not here to fight